Greetings, YouTube. I am always experimenting to try to figure out the best mastery setup. And when I say best, it's subjective, right? Because what works for you is not going to work for me. You may not care at all about PI. If you don't do the arena, then my mastery setup, quite frankly, is something you shouldn't follow. And I want to say that off the top because this is what's worked for me. And I've had probably about 20 to 30 mastery setups in my time in Marvel Contest of Champions. And I always feel like I'm tweaking a couple things here or there. But something that really opened my eyes up to how masteries are important but not the end-all be-all was my Abyss run. I survived several fights in which, on paper, I should have been destroyed because I had literally 0 mastery points in defense. All I did was max out for that particular path, parry, and stupefy. And that's all I needed. I thought to myself, without perfect block or block proficiency or whatever, I'm screwed. Not the case. So that did open my eyes up a bit, but I still love masteries like Willpower, especially because I really appreciate, particularly when you're fighting like the Science Doombot, I appreciate getting that regeneration when I've made mistakes or not had the cleanest of fights leading up to that Doombot. So in order to get Willpower, you have to have a good amount of mastery points in defense. So I'm not here to say defense doesn't matter. I'm just saying that it kind of changed the way I viewed the mastery setup in general. So what you're seeing right now is pretty much unchanged. Really, the change is going to come on defense and even proficiencies. But for now, I just want to point out a couple things about this. I took out 1 point in precision a few months ago, and I have not noticed a visible difference at all in going down that 1 point. And I did that because I really wanted to max out deep wounds. And I was stuck at 4 out of 5 and did not really know where am I going to pull that extra point to give it a max score. So, bleed debuffs last 2.5 seconds longer. 2.5 seconds is a long time. And if you fired off that Blade Special 2, or even shoot parrying with Blade, but then if you use champions like I love using Ronin, I love using X-23, heck, I love using OG Black Panther. Wolverine, Black Widow Clairvoyant, so many different champions that can cause bleeds. Deep wounds is going to impact the amount of damage you do immediately, and when you cause bleed, it's just a lot of fun. And so deep wounds is my favorite mastery because it's the most fun mastery to see the difference in and how many seconds that ticks off. Now, I will say that just as I discussed previously with precision, if you have 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5, I don't know if you're necessarily going to visually notice the difference, but for me, it's just comforting to know that that bleed damage is maxed out. I also have to say that Incursions has made it even more apparent to me how important deep wounds can be. And with that being said, we're going to talk about Incursions framing this mastery tweak that I've done as well. So, you can tell if you don't want to do Suicide Masteries, this is a non-Alliance War mastery setup, and a lot of people, in fact, most people, I would say, do Alliance War. So, again, if your Alliance does not want you to have Suicides on defense, and I completely understand because of the recoil damage you take from specials, then you want to listen to your Alliance mate. You don't want to be like, well, Prof. Hoff said this is the best mastery setup, so screw you. No, not why I'm making this video. But I also know there are people who are maybe even looking to take a step back to do a war casual alliance, and some of you are even so burnt out you told me you just are going to go alliance list period, like my boy Captain Bay. So if you're willing to do that, then I would maximize the time that you have, especially if you want to grind the arena. It always gives me great joy to hear people who contact me who say, Prof, I finally put the mastery cores into a Suicide Mastery setup, and gosh, the difference in how fast I get to arena milestones, which means I spend less time in the arena, is substantial, so thank you for that. I love when that light bulb goes off and they realize, hey, mastery setup really can be important to spending less time in the arena, which I get is a soulless, crushing grind. I also haven't really noticed that much, even in content like the Abyss, with Assassin only at 1 point. And so that was surprising to me because I thought, especially for those huge health pool fights, that I would think to myself, man, I really need to max out Assassin, for example. But nope, not the case. Okay, so I know I spent the beginning of this video talking about how defense had 0 points in it, and I was still so able to clear Abyss paths with more ease than I thought, especially with those high attack, high health defenders. But with that being said, I still value Salve maxed out, and I still value Recovery maxed out. Now, Recovery is more important than Salve. Salve is just kind of like a little bit of a bonus. Not much health, but I notice it more in like the 2-star arena than anything else because the health pools are less. But why do I do this? Because this is the best PI setup, except I guess you could argue that block proficiency doesn't really help PI, but I still love having that maxed. But I did this because I thought to myself, when do my champions lose more health? Is it at the beginning of the fights from taking bleed damage for those champions that aren't bleed immune? Or is it with taking block damage because I parry so much? And I realized it's the bleed damage. The bleed damage is guaranteed at the beginning of the fight, and the otherwise is not. And I have to say, especially when I'm using Aegon, that, I need to build up that combo, and he does not shrug off those bleeds, especially at the beginning of trying to build that. So I decided to do something a little bold, and maybe this is going to seem dumb to some people, and I totally get it if that's the case, because there's some controversy in my mastery setup. I want to remind you that I only have 1 out of 3 in courage instead of 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 3. I know a lot of people have 3 out of 3. I get why, but maybe I just don't have the courage to make that change. But I decided to max Coagulate. So my champions take 30% less damage from any bleed debuff or bleed passive effect they suffer, which really factors into the beginning of the fight whenever I am taking that Suicide Mastery damage. Keep in mind, if you haven't run Suicides before, part of what makes them literal suicide is that you increase the attack of all champions by 30%, but up to 20% health is lost by a bleed debuff over 16 seconds. So if your champions aren't bleed immune, you're going to tick off, literally, about 1/5 of your health. So when you max Double Edge, but you combine that with maxing Coagulate, you're taking far less bleed damage at the beginning of the fight, and that's going to cause your champions to stay alive faster. It's also going to cause somebody like Stark Spidey, who I still use quite often, to get above his 50% health pool for longer, which is relevant when he is awakened. So, what did I sacrifice to make Coagulate maxed from my last mastery setup? Well, thanks for asking myself. I sacrificed 2 out of 3 points in parry. Now, I gotta tell you, I have fought mini bosses on day 5 of Alliance Quest, and I am in a very high prestige alliance, so those mini bosses are not easy to take down. And of course, I'm still taking block damage. I'm not saying this is like a perfect block scenario, but I've been surprised at how little damage I've taken, and I think part of the reason is I can afford to lose 2 points in parry by continuing to max out block proficiency. I think that kind of evens out. And so, yeah, for me, it is a better decision, and it even is a slight PI bump. Now, this isn't really going to matter for the arena. It's like a 50-point difference. But if you look at my best champions now, you'll see that my Human Torch is over 18,000 PI, and then Black Widow Clairvoyant was at like 16,900 something, and she's now at 17,000. And that's the difference between taking parry down to 1 out of 3 and maxing out Coagulate. So I really, really like this setup for the arena, for overall questing, for Alliance Quest. If you don't do the arena, if you don't care about PI, and if you're going to do something like the Abyss or even Alliance War, this is not the setup for you. This is for questing, and this is for just fun, just doing a lot of damage possible, but still having enough points in defense. Really, it's all about willpower to me. If willpower did not have that crazy amount of needed points in defense to unlock, I would just have probably 6 points in defense. I'd probably just have 3 in willpower and 3 in Coagulate, and then use the rest for proficiencies in offense. And I think Kabam knows that, and that's why they have such a high requirement for a certain amount of mastery points in defense before you can unlock willpower. But, personally, in a perfect world, that's what I would love to see. Well, there you have it, YouTube. I want to keep this video, about where it is right now. And so I'm going to end it here. Thank you to everybody who continues to give me feedback for tweaks. I get there are a couple of controversial decisions I made that aren't the norm, but I also, it's my channel. I get to do what I want. So I like to show you what works for me. It might not work for you, but it works for me. Have a good day, YouTube. Thanks for watching.